volume. We're going to focus on volume as well. So we're going to start today with our discussion on circles. So real quickly, I'm going to draw a quick picture of a circle, and every circle has what is called the center point, so the center of the circle. And it's really important that you understand the parts of your circle. So let's go ahead and get to labeling. The first thing that I want to talk to you guys about is the radius. So the radius is a measurement that's inside the circle. It's the length from the center to a point on the circle. Okay, so it's a length starting at our center and moving to a point on the circle. That would be labeled the radius. So go ahead and draw that out. Label it the radius. It's a half measurement is what I like to call it. That little half measurement starts at the center, which is the very center point of your circle, and goes all the way to any point on your circle. So I could draw my radius here. My radius could start here and go here. I could start here and go to this point, all over. As long as you're starting at the center, going anywhere out, all of those are considered to be radii, or a radius of the circle. Okay, then you've got what's called the diameter. So the diameter is your longest length. It's your longest measurement inside the circle. So it's from one point on the circle passing through the center and extending to an opposite point. So let me show you that on the circle itself. So I'm going to start at some point on my circle. I'm going to start here. I'm going to pass through the center and extend all the way to an opposite point on the circle. That's called the diameter. So let me go ahead and turn this and write diameter. Okay, then you've got what is called our circumference. And circumference is essentially the perimeter of the circle. It's the distance around a circle. It's your distance around your circle. So if we start at some point outside the circle and wrap our way around it, that is the distance around the circle. That would be your circumference. Okay? Now, some important things to make sure you keep in mind. When we're talking about the diameter, the measurement for the diameter is equal to twice the radius. So let's take a look at the picture. Your diameter measurement, remember I said the radius starts at the center and extends to one point, right? So from here to here, that would be considered to be a radius, just like from here to here. That would also be a radius. So if I take the radius and add another radius, that gives me the diameter. Same thing. If I take this radius and then continue to extend it for another radius, then that whole extension would be the diameter. So your diameter is going to be twice the size of the radius. So I'm going to say D is equal to 2 times R, R being the radius. And then the reverse is true, that the radius is equal to half the diameter. The radius is equal to half of the diameter. So radius is equal to the diameter divided by 2. Radius is equal to half of your diameter. Radius divided by, or diameter divided by 2 will give you the radius. Now there's also a couple other formulas that you're going to need to make sure that you understand. And I'll go ahead and put them off to the side here. They will be given to you. You will be given these next 2 formulas. The first one is circumference, the circumference formula. So circumference, we're going to label it C. In order to find the circumference, you need to take the diameter's measurement and you're going to multiply it by a value that we label pi. So in case you guys don't know, pi is this little symbol that's 2 lines and it's got like a squiggly line on top of it. Pi is represented as 3.14. 3.14. So we use 3.14 as our representation for pi. It's an irrational number. That means that it has no repetition to it. It actually never ever stops. So it keeps going on and on and on and on and on. We just use a simplified estimated version of it when we're doing our geometry. Okay, and then the other formula that you're going to need to know is your area. And keep in mind, area is a second power. That means that if we're talking about units, so if we have, inches, then area would be inches squared. If it's feet, it would be feet squared. So for area formula, you're going to be taking the radius and multiplying it by itself. So radius times radius. This is not the same thing as radius times 2. Remember, 2 times the radius is the diameter. Radius times the radius is different. So if my radius is 4, 4 times 4 would be 16. It's not the same thing as 4 times 2, which would be 8. Okay, so keep that in mind. This is also known as r to the second power. So if you want to write it as r squared, that's perfectly fine. Just make sure you understand that a second power means that you're doing r times r. And then, of course, you're going to multiply it by pi. So r squared times pi, or r times pi. Okay, so those are the formulas that will be given to you. These will not. You need to make sure you understand that the diameter is twice the radius is half the diameter. All right, so we're going to focus on just some real easy, basic problems for your unit test because we are moving so quickly. So let's go ahead and turn the page. And I'm going to give you just a couple of problems in which I want you to find the circumference and the area. So I'm going to write that at the top. Find circumference and area. All right, so let's start with the very first problem. Let's say that this is 6 meters. 6 meters. Okay, so let's start with our circumference. Actually, let's start first with what information do we know. Okay, so what information has been given to us? The radius. So we know that radius is equal to 6 meters. Okay, so if we know the radius is equal to 6 meters, then I can find the diameter. The diameter is equal to the radius times 2, so I just have to take 6 and multiply it by 2, and that gives me 12 meters. So the diameter is 12 meters, the radius is 6 meters. All right, so now let's talk about our formulas. Circumference. Circumference is equal to the diameter times pi. Okay, so all I have to do is plug in the information that I have. The diameter in this case is 12. Pi is 3.14. So we're going to multiply 12 times 3.14, and that gives me a circumference of 37.68 inches. So there's my circumference. Area. So for my area formula, remember area is radius times radius times pi. Radius times radius times pi. Again, we know that the radius is 6. So we're going to do 6 times 6 times pi, so times 3.14. So 6 times 6 is 36, and 36 times 3.14 is going to give me my area, which is 113.04, and this is in meters squared. Meters squared. So it's always a good idea that when you're given a unit, if you're given the radius, identify what the radius is and the diameter. If you're given diameter, you've identified diameter, now identify radius. It's always a good idea to know what both of those measurements are. Okay, let's go on to another problem. All right, 20 inches. 20 inches. And again, I want to know what's the circumference and what's the diameter. The area. So the first thing I want to know is what item has been given to me. So this measurement is the diameter. So I know that the diameter is equal to 20 inches. Well, I also want to know what's the radius. So remember, radius, I take the diameter and I divide it in half, divide it by 2. So that means I'm going to take 20 and divide it by 2, and that's going to give me 10 inches for the radius. So the radius is 10 inches, the diameter is 20 inches. Okay, now let's go ahead and focus first on our circumference. Circumference is equal to diameter times pi. The diameter in this case is 20. Pi is 3.14. So now we're just going to multiply 20 times 3.14, and that's going to give me 62.8 inches. So there's my circumference, 62.8 inches. Okay, now let's focus on the area. So again, area is equal to radius times radius times pi. Okay, the radius in this case is 10. So we're going to do 10 times 10 times pi, which is 3.14. Okay, 10 times 10 is 100, and then 100 times 3.14 is going to give us 314. So we get 314 inches squared. Area is always squared. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and do one more practice problem. This one's going to be just a little bit different. So I know that the circumference is equal to the diameter times pi, right? So that also means that the diameter is equal to the circumference divided by pi. So if I divide both sides by pi, if I divide by pi here, that's going to get rid of it. Then I'd have to divide by pi here. I would now have diameter is equal to circumference divided by pi. This is really important to know because sometimes you might be given a circumference and you need to find the area. You might be given circumference and you need to find out what the area is. Okay, so let's try a problem like that. If I say that circumference is equal to 31.4 feet, and I want to know what is the area. Circumference is equal to 31.4 feet. What is the area? Okay, so I know that I can take my circumference and I can divide it by pi, and that will leave me with the diameter because diameter times pi was circumference. So circumference divided by pi will work backwards, doing an inverse to give me my diameter. So I'm going to take circumference, that 31.4, and I'm going to divide it by 3.14, and that's going to give me a diameter of 10. So that's 10 feet. My diameter is 10 feet. Now, I didn't want the diameter, I wanted the area. I wanted the area. So I could then take that diameter. I know diameter is equal to 10, and if I divide that in half, divide it by 2, that's going to give me a radius of 5. So now I know the radius and I can plug it into my area formula. Remember, area is just equal to radius times pi. So I can take 5 and multiply it by 5 and multiply it by 3.14. And that's going to give me an area of 78.5 feet squared. 78.5 feet squared. All right, we're going to stop here for today. Just go ahead and do your assignment real quickly, and we'll come back and start a new unit or a new lesson.